U.S. Air Force Captain Rusty. And our training films are the hilarious Charlie Sheen spoof Hot Shots, followed by Lou Gossett Jr. in Aces, Iron Eagle 3, movies that are not authorized by the Air Force, by the by. Well, it's time for our second feature starring Arnold the Barbarian, Conan the Destroyer, and we'll be ogling more muscles to earn that one bodybuilding 304 credit tonight, including those of Grace Jones and Wilt the Stilt Chamberlain, Arnold's co-stars in Conan the Destroyer. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but suffice it to say that Conan the Destroyer is at least twice as good as Conan the Barbarian, because you know how in the first one Arnold says about 20 words in the whole flick because he's trying to communicate with Sandahl Bergman? Well, in this one, Arnold only says about 3 words because Sandahl is dead, right? She's one dead pork chop. So we're talking more thwacks and less facts, more pecs and less sex. Arnold, the only actor in history who has muscles on the outside of his skin, gets blood on his deltoids in almost every scene of this movie. So anyway, let's take a look at the drive-in totals and then get back to it. We have 52 dead bodies, 2 breaths, both of them on Conan, 9 gallons of human blood, 1 gallon green lizard blood, 3 beasts, 2 heads roll, 1 ear-to-ear throat-slitting, excellent kung fu, 4 stars. Check it out. Go. Sometimes flicks like this aren't logical, though, and it bugs me, because they want us to think that Wilt Chamberlain is going to kill Conan the Barbarian. Everybody knows that Wilt couldn't even play defense on Bill Russell, right? And if you're watching Wilt, please don't beat me up, because don't make me get nasty, because I'll get all your girlfriends in the same room at the same time. We'll get really vicious on you, Wilt, because Wilt is a guy who claims he slept with 20,000 women, you know? I was going to try to break his record, but you seen the prices lately? Ooh. First, there was my TNT Monster Vision website with the famous caption contest, which is still going strong, I might add. Then we added the incredibly sexy Monster Vision t-shirt, coveted by would-be prize winners everywhere. Then we added the Find That Flick contest, in which you can win all kinds of free junk just by knowing the plots of weird movies. And now we proudly present Joe Bob's Summer School website, which is the perfect companion to my summer-long movie lineup on TNT. Well, not the perfect companion. Jennifer Lopez would be the perfect companion. But my point is, I'm slowly building an empire here at TNT. It's no longer possible to take me lightly, and I'll take just as much time as I want with this promo. Okay, to find out your class assignments and guest lecturers, get on the information superhighway and drive to tnt.turner.com/summer school and
enroll at Joe Bob's Summer School now at tnt.turner.com/summer school. Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
See, it's already better than the first one, isn't it? It's faster, it's more interesting, it's got better characters. Arnold is still going around slugging horses and camels like in the first movie, although come to think of it, that's a direct steal from Blazing Saddles, isn't it? Wilt Chamberlain, wearing the world's worst wig and 9,000 pounds of wet mastodon fur, is still pretty decent in his film debut. This was his film debut. And they hired the veteran Richard Fleischer to direct. John Milius directed the first one. It was not his kind of thing, as you probably noticed. It was slow and plodding, even though it ended up making $100 million and making the second one possible. But Richard Fleischer, who he must be in his 80s by now, because he was doing theater in New York back in the 30s, but Richard was kind of known as the master of the big-budget adventure film, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and Fantastic Voyage and Tora, 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 and one of our favorites around here, Soylent Green. Actually, he was originally one of those film noir guys back in the 50s, you know, the guys who did the gritty black and white realism films. My two favorite Richard Fleischer flicks are The New Centurions, remember that one? And Mandingo. I won't even mention the immortal Amityville 3D. That was a good one, too. Anyway, Richard Fleischer knew exactly what to do with the Conan story, which was to surround Conan with interesting characters and limit his dialogue to 3 words per sequence, basically turn him into a fighting machine. And he also knew it wouldn't hurt to dress up the 14-year-old Olivia Dabo in a nightie with a great bodice on it. Whoa! How'd they get away with that, you know? Put that picture on the internet and the FBI child porno squad comes knocking on your door. Whoa, go, roll it. Richard Fleischer, he's good. Richard Fleischer and Arnold, they probably reminisced about their Austrian heritage while making the film, because Arnold had just become an American citizen in 1983 after he grew up in Graz, Austria. And Richard was born in Brooklyn, but his dad was from Vienna. His dad was Max Fleischer of the Dave and Max Fleischer animation team, creators of Popeye and Betty Boop. So It's in his genes. Those wacky Austrians. Want to win a free video of some obscure horror movie you've never heard of that some guy in West Virginia made in his basement? Of course you do. That's why umpteen jillion people have discovered our Find That Flick contest. If you've never heard of it, forget it. It's too complicated to explain on TV. But you can find out all about it on our MonsterVision website at tnt.turner.com/MonsterVision. And I'll give you one clue. If you're one of those guys who never leaves his apartment except to rent videos, this contest was designed to give heretofore unrealized meaning to your life.
Play the Find That Flick contest at tnt.turner.com/MonsterVision. Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
Isn't Grace Jones great? Grace Jones with a burr haircut jousting and headbutting with Wilt Chamberlain, whose hair is 9 feet long. How good is that? She kind of steals the movie with that wild woman act, you know. The way she got involved in this is that she knew the producer, Dino De Laurentiis. Actually, his daughter, Rafaela De Laurentiis, is the producer of this movie. But she knew him from the 70s when she was doing weird, low-budget movies over in Europe. The last movie she made before Conan the Destroyer was Army of Lovers or Revolt of the Perverts, a German flick made in 1978. Can we get that for the show? Because I want to see that, Revolt of the Perverts. It's in German, though, so maybe I don't. Okay, back to the movie. I have nothing against Germans, but they always have these black and white flashback scenes, you know, where a mime dances on a clown's head with an umbrella in his hand and then slits his throat. You know what I'm talking about? You guys need to get out and see these things, these German, the flashback mime sequence, that's what they call it. They teach it in German film school. Sometimes the flashback sequence has Santa Claus dressed in drag, butchering a pig or something, but they're all artistes over there in Germany.
Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
Hey, what was that? God, they're doing it again. That was about a 2-minute segment. Don't you guys have any respect for the hardworking students of Joe Bob Summer School here? The Wizard stole Olivia Dabo, and she's going to be the first to do something in 1,000 years, so we want to find out what that is, okay? Good grief. Okay, back to the movie. I think I represent the typical TNT viewer when I say that you should just charge more for the commercials and have less of them, right? You agree? Well, there's going to be a memo Monday morning, Dear Mr. Briggs, and it's going to be signed Vice President Sales and Marketing, and I'm going to be rattling a paper cup in front of Bloomingdale's, but that's okay, because it felt good for about 20 seconds there, so no regrets, right?
Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
What happened to Grace Jones? There's very little Grace Jones during this part. Okay, I think it might be helpful at this point to sum up the entire plot of the movie thus far. Starts out with Arnold the Barbarian hacking off 9 or 10 body parts with his 1,000-pound Wilkinson sword machete. And then he decks a horse with a roundhouse right like Alex Karras in Blazing Saddles. And then this British bitch queen comes up and tells Arnold to stop messing around with her guards and go bring back the precious jewel from the sorcerer's palace, because otherwise there's no movie. So Arnold says what's in it for him, and the royal bitch says if Arnold will take her virgin daughter to the jewel, then she'll bring Sandal Bergman back to life. And Arnold says, really? And then a camel vomits on Arnold, and Arnold has to deck him. And then Conan gets the virgin. He starts off for the Magic Palace with his sidekick, a weenie named Mayalox or something, who looks like Gene Hackman's midget brother. But at the last minute, the bitch queen decides to send Wilt Chamberlain along for the ride. So Wilt puts on a spiked helmet with horns, and the queen tells him as soon as they get the jewel to kill Conan. And then they go riding off through the desert until they find these white-faced zombies roasting a Chinese guy on a spit. And Arnold hacks off a few heads and cuts the Chinese guy loose and tells the guy he needs him for his journey, and the Chinese guy wears a beanie and mutters a lot. And then they go to a town where Grace Jones has her leg chained up and she's fighting off 6 guys with a spear, and the virgin princess sees what's going on. And by the way, Olivia Dabo looks like she got lost on her way to the Celine Dion concert, don't you think? And anyway, Olivia thinks it's not fair. There's 6 guys against 1 girl in chains, so Arnold goes over and cuts Grace Jones loose from the chain, and Grace takes a big stick and starts polling people in their privates. And then Grace decides to join the big party on the way to the palace, and then there's a bunch of plot where they go to the palace and get the jewel and kill the one-eyed magician with gold fingers, and Arnold has to wrestle a giant gorilla man in a red cape who comes out of a mirror house, and then the palace falls to pieces and they get away. And then Wilt starts acting funny, and they get ambushed by some Vikings, and they get all banged up, and Wilt tries to kill Conan, but he has a good explanation, so Conan is too stupid to believe that Wilt is trying to kill him. And that's about it, right? Does that sum it up? Okay, back to the movie. Because people go to the bathroom, see, they miss stuff. I did that as a consumer service. They don't do that on TBS. You know what they do over there? I don't even think they watch the movie at TBS. I can't prove it, but it's not about the movie over there. It's about personal greed and ambition. That's what it's about. I'm sorry, but that's just my own personal opinion. They don't make more money than us, do they? And we beat them in the ratings, right? We do.
Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
Wow, a short segment and a lame segment. Olivia Dabo learns how to fight and then asks what sex is. Of course, since 1984, she's learned what sex is, hasn't she? In movies like Greedy and The Last Good Time and Live Nude Girls, this was her first movie ever after training with the London Royal Ballet Theatre. And then she went on to her most famous role as the hippie older sister Karen Arnold on The Wonder Years. The year 1984 was also the year that Arnold Schwarzenegger became a superstar, because this movie came out, and then right after this came The Terminator. Because up till then, he'd struggled a little, well, a little bit, not as much as the normal person when I say struggle, but he'd struggled as a movie actor. For those of you who don't know by now, Arnold grew up in Graz, Austria, the son of the police chief of Graz, who was a stern man. He was a former member of the Nazi Party. So at the age of 15, Arnold rebelled against his dad, because his dad wanted him to be a professional soccer player, but Arnold wanted to be a pro bodybuilder. And then he moved to the United States in 1968, and he went to the University of Wisconsin, and he majored in business and economics, and his bodybuilding career just took off. He was billed as the Austrian Oak, and he won Mr. World, Mr. Universe 5 times, and Mr. Olympia 7 times. And ironically, he's so rich today that he owns both the Mr. Universe and the Mr. Olympia pageants. So anyway, he retired undefeated in 1980, and during all those years, he was trying to get into the movies. Now, he made Hercules in New York in 1970 under the name Arnold Strong, but it was so bad it was never released until 1983, and they dubbed his voice. But then he was in Bob Rafelson's Stay Hungry as a bodybuilder, and he first really came to prominence in Pumping Iron in 1977, one of the greatest documentaries ever made. Love that movie, but he really didn't need the money by that time, because he had invested all his bodybuilding winnings and the revenues he got from his mail-order real estate business, and he was already a millionaire by the time he became an American citizen in 1983. And then he married Maria Shriver, and up until 1993, he held the distinction of being the only major movie star who had never had a flop. Unfortunately, 1993 is the year he released The Last Action Hero, so still a pretty remarkable story. Okay, let's get back to the picture. That's still his only flop, right? Well, Junior. Ray Junior. But you know, that one and Junior. Well, there's Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin. Hey, the man's 52 years old. He's eventually going to screw up, okay?
Rusty the Mail Girl here, inviting you to visit our Monster Vision website. This is the place to get the scoop on zombies, ghouls, road warriors, or whatever happens to be the late-breaking story on this week's show. Check out our Playmate of the Week, or try your luck at the Monster Vision caption contest and win a free T-shirt. Or visit Joe Bob's mailbag page, where you can see your favorite fan mail of the week. To find us on the internet, go to tnt.turner.com/monstervision. I'll be waiting.
Visit the Monster Vision website at tnt.turner.com/monstervision. Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
way too much plot getting in the way of the story here. We got jewels, we got magic horns, we got wizards, we got curses and prophecies. You know, if you read the original Conan books, the stories are kind of simple. It's too bad, but even in the best Conan movies, they don't really achieve what the books did. Because Robert E. Howard wrote 12 Conan novels back in the 30s, and Robert was a Texas good old boy, lived out in Cross Plains, Texas, in the area of West Texas we call the Cross Timbers, middle of gall-dang nowhere is where that is, land of the scrub oak and the mesquite, and he never traveled farther than Fort Worth his whole life. He would go to Fort Worth for boxing matches, but that was the only traveling he ever did. And he liked guns, and he liked writing stories, and he hated snakes, which when you live in West Texas, you deal with rattlesnakes all the time. You notice how there's always a deadly snake scene in every Conan story? So anyway, Robert E. Howard never made much money, never got married, just lived with his mother in a little frame house, and he sent stories off to the pulp magazines in New York. He wrote detective stories, wrote poetry, wrote Western stories, but the most original thing he created were these barbarian stories. And then in 1936, his mother died, and he just couldn't deal with it. So he typed a few lines on his typewriter, and he got out his pistol, and he went out to the car, and he committed suicide. And they buried him next to his mother, and he was 30 years old. And when the local newspaper reporter went in the house, he found a sheet of paper that was still there in the typewriter, and he pulled it out because it was Robert E. Howard's last words. And it was a poem, and it said, "All fled, all done, so lift me on the pyre. The feast is over, the lamps expire." Okay, back to the movie. What? They love it when I tell gloomy stories. You like that, didn't you? You know, you can go to the main cemetery there in Brownwood and see Robert E. Howard's grave. And when he was alive, nobody really even knew he was a writer. You know, nobody paid any attention to him. Now they have Robert E. Howard festivals out there in Brownwood and Cross Plains. You ever been to Cross Plains? Anybody ever been to Cross Plains? Whoa, you take the worst desert they show in this movie, it's worse. Not a very pretty part of Texas. Looks like a giant fell on it and mashed all the trees down into mush.
Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
That wily Wilt Chamberlain, you knew he was going to steal the girl, didn't you? Okay, time for the big special effects jamboree conclusion to Conan the Destroyer, where Conan finally squares off against Dagoth, the monster created by Carlo Rambaldi, creator of E.T. You know the only thing I don't like about this picture? Wilt is great. Grace Jones, great. Mako is great as Akiro the Wizard. Olivia Dabo, she's okay as the 14-year-old virgin princess. But it's the comic relief sidekick. You know? Tracy Walter is okay as an actor, but I just don't think we need that guy. One too many characters in the movie, but then that's just my opinion. All right, roll it. Wilt Chamberlain, captain of the greatest team in NBA history, the 1966-67 Philadelphia 76ers. Am I right? Chet Walker, Hal Greer, Billy Cunningham, Luke Jackson, Wally Jones, Matt Gukas. You know why it was greater than modern teams? Better than the Bulls? Slam dunking was illegal. And you know why slam dunking was illegal? Because they actually made up rules to penalize Wilt Chamberlain. They widened the lane because of Wilt. They invented offensive goaltending because of Wilt. They changed the free throw rules because of Wilt. You know, Wilt had one year where he averaged 50.4 points a game. You know how many times he scored 50 points or more in a single game? 118 times. You know how many times he scored 60 points or more? 32 times. 30,000 points in Wilt's career. You know, they said he was a womanizer, you know, but I think he worked harder than he womanized. Because, you know, the estimates were only 20,000 women, so look at your figures. 30,000 points, 20,000 women. Work was a priority with this guy.
Back to Joe Bob Summer School and Conan the Destroyer on TNT.
So Conan passes up the 14-year-old jailbait virgin queen in order to go his lonely barbarian way. Although I guess in barbarian times there was no such thing as jailbait, right? So let's just not go down that road, okay? Conan the Destroyer, the film deemed unsuitable by the Dallas Motion Picture Classification Board, even though it got a PG from the MPAA. Universal had to go to court to get it released as a PG in Dallas, Texas. Okay, I want to thank our special guest lecturer, Karen Voight, for helping us out tonight. And I want to remind you that next week's summer school class is on applied aeronautics from World War II to 5 minutes ago. And our guest will be former Air Force pilot Rusty, the TNT mail girl. And we'll be at March Air Force Base on a field trip to do that show. And I'd like to be her co-pilot, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. And we'll be watching the wacky Air Force comedy Hot Shots and the third in the Lou Gossett action flick series, Aces, Iron Eagle 3. And that's it for me, Professor Joe Bob, reminding you here on Bodybuilding Night that inside every fat person is a thin person struggling to get out. But they can usually be sedated with a few pieces of chocolate cake. You guys hear the one about Hercules, Sleeping Beauty, and Quasimodo? Well, they were talking one day, and Hercules says, I reckon I'm the strongest person in the world. And Sleeping Beauty says, well, I reckon I'm the most beautiful person in the world. And Quasimodo says, well, I reckon I'm the ugliest person in the world. So they go down to the Guinness Book of World Records to have their claims ratified. Hercules goes in, and he comes out first, and he's looking very happy, and he says, it's official, I am the strongest person in the world. Sleeping Beauty goes in, and she comes out next. She's looking ecstatic, and she says, and I am officially the most beautiful person in the world. Quasimodo goes in, he comes out, and he's completely crestfallen. And he says, who the hell is Linda Tripp? Joe Bob Briggs reminding you that the drive-in will never die. Big movie producer is talking about his new project, an action picture about famous composers. And he's going to have several top stars in this movie. So he's going to use Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the studio wants the box office power of all three of them, so they tell them they can pick whichever composer they want to play. So Sylvester Stallone says, well, I've always liked Mozart. I'd love to play him. And Jean-Claude Van Damme says, Chopin has always been my favorite. I'll play him. And the producer is really happy, and he says, sounds great, but who do you want to be, Arnold? And Arnold says, I'll be Bach.